Hello everyone. What I wanted to talk about today was the rise of the internet guitar player, the YouTube guitar player. We've seen over the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, a shift from making songs, making records, to making videos of a riff or a song or a small segment in your bedroom, putting it online, and getting a following that way. And that I think has really hobbled the metal movement. Um, there's been not a whole lot of incentive to make a full album if you're going to go ahead and get a huge following by playing a 30-second riff that looks dexterous. And eventually, before you know it, you have enough content out there where you're buying a house. There's several players out there that don't have actual records but have bought homes from doing online guitar tutorials of their own riffs, or doing sketch comedy interspersed with some metal riffs. And I just really think that we've kind of moved pretty far backwards if that's how we're going to be equating success in the metal genre. Um, I think the main problem is when you introduce the concept of charisma into the equation. That ends up ruining the objective viewing of the product. It's very easy to get lost in a persona online. You start watching someone's YouTube channel, you find that they're amusing, and you, before you know it, are convinced that you like their content because you've connected with them as a person. And I think that the less you know about the artist, probably the better it is for you to evaluate the music and find out if it resonates with you. But it's really a shame that we've gone from trying to make like a grandiose artistic statement with a metal record to doing some sketch comedy that's guitar focused, gaining an audience that way, and kind of lampooning what metal is. Which, you know, there's a time and place for that. Like Metalocalypse, the cartoon, very successful at lampooning metal. And when you take a genre overly seriously, when you don't have the content to back it up, then it's okay to have a parody of you. And all of the tropes in that show definitely had it coming. But the main issue that I'm having with the internet guitar player is that they're all kind of portraying themselves as a progressive player. They're coming at it as if they are really being innovative in what they're getting across, when what really it has morphed into the style that they're playing is still an offshoot of what metalcore was at the turn of the century, and then what gent became around, like, what, 2008 or whatever that happened. So they may have very busy, very dexterous parts, but at the heart of it, you have that tonality that crept in with metalcore, and the staccato chugs in between, and the scales that flesh everything out when you can't come up with a melodic line of your own. And that's what I'm hearing a lot of with a lot of these players. Once you start letting that metalcore tonality in, it just kind of infects everything that you work on like a virus. You just can't get rid of it. And as soon as I hear a new player, I try to approach it with a clean slate, and I'm just hearing this metalcore undercurrent, and I know that has somehow eaten away at the influences that could present an actual progressive outlook with music. Because once you start bringing in that metalcore tonality and that metalcore structure focus, where you have to have that staccato breakdown or whatever, you're writing for the audience and you're not writing for yourself. So that's the main issue I have with that. It's not prog. Like none of the stuff that these guys are doing, to me, is part of the prog umbrella. And I think that the reason I'm able to notice that is that when metal was in its heyday, you were able to utilize speed, brutality, technicality as like the vehicle for your message. And now the vehicle is the message. And that's a problem because there isn't an emotion attached to what these guys are doing. What these guys are doing is the dexterity. That's the focus. And when you don't have that drive behind it, that emotional attachment to what you're doing, it's more an exercise than anything. And it's gotten to the point where all of these players have the same type of guitar. They're all playing Kiesel guitars. They all have the same plugins. They have the same sound, and that tonality. It's just all the same. Like a band I wanted to look at today, Inferi. To me, there's essentially identical to Archspire or Rivers of Nile. All that stuff is kind of this morass of sameness that I couldn't pick their songs out of a lineup. I wish I could, but it's just all part of the same musical vocabulary at this point, where when you get in that rut where the dexterity is what drives your music and your peers are doing the same thing, the only way you can elaborate on what you're doing is to get more dexterous. I don't want to say technical because the music is only technical on a surface level, but you can get busier, you can get more convoluted, and that's kind of where it's going now. There's this like arms race of technical musicians, but none of what they're doing actually has a subtext to it. There's not a message, like I was saying, and when you're going to be presenting these like bite-sized nuggets of riffs, I encountered a player the other day that is only putting out like 30-second riffs. They're very busy, very ornate, puts out a video once or twice a day. That is feeding into the current generation that needs that instant gratification. They need to see that flash in the pan superficiality right away, because that's all they have the attention span for. They're not going to sit down and open up a lyric booklet and read along with everything and really get to the heart of what each song represents and how that song presents the album in its own microcosm. But that's just kind of where we're at right now. And I think that the more that this becomes the face of what metal is, the more we're going to have the album in general be a concept that we're going to be moving away from. There's nothing really timeless about throwing a 30-second clip of you playing guitar online, whereas people are going to be talking about Master of Puppets forever. But that's not the focus, and that's a problem. So I think that I wanted to focus on one particular band. I wanted to talk about Inferi today because they're kind of showcasing a lot of the handicaps that I'm seeing in modern metal writing in this riff playthrough. And this is what they brought to the table as something that they're going to have the audience learn. But after looking through it, I can see that there is a lot of the same musical crutches and that same tonality that resonates with that entire genre that just kind of hobbles the riff and probably the song that it's attached to. But we'll start talking about that in a bit. But as far as the construction of music and why I think that this approach, the internet guitar player approach, is so harmful, is that you don't really have the building process as the focus in your presentation. If you're going to be showing me a riff or a song, I'm only getting a small facet of what you're trying to bring to the table. And I like to think about it as, say you're a carpenter. You have all the best tools for the job. You have all the skill needed to put it together. But if you can't build a functional house where all of the parts of the house contribute to the greater whole of a functional place to live, you don't really have anything to pin you down as having a successful output. And that's what the internet guitar player is doing in my mind. They're showing you that they've built a cool room, but they don't have a house to build around it. And I think that we're going to keep focusing on that as we move further into what modern metal is becoming. So I'm going to throw up this Inferi track and look at what he's doing on the guitar and try to break down some of the things that I'm seeing as crutches and handicaps, and why I think that it's not really the technical benchmark that the band is trying to portray itself as. So that first bit that he's playing, it's kind of a shape that he is manipulating the sequence of notes in, but it's a constant barrage of 16th notes. So there's really nothing that makes any particular note of it stick out. You just kind of encounter this flurry of notes that, to me, starts to end up feeling like wallpaper music. And what he really needs going into this next segment of the riff would be a little break from that constant just something rhythmically different to cause a sense of movement in your riff and then therefore your song. But having seen this before, I know that what he's about to go into is some of that like metalcore tonality that you get when you go with a pedal tone anchoring, which is what he's about to settle into. He's going to anchor his index finger down on the lowest string and then alternate the picking between the notes that he's able to reach on the next adjacent string. And when you go into this kind of thing, you're kind of getting that at the gates vibe that everybody knows from Slaughter of the Soul. When you're anchoring your root note, you're only able to get a certain set of notes that you can reach in that position, and if you're at this speed, you're kind of already handicapping yourself at what you're able to hit. So by locking down on that fret with his index finger, he's kind of forcing himself into a tonality that you've heard a million times by a million other bands. So what he would need to do to make this a little more interesting is to, like I said, break up that rhythm, but he's going to keep going with that constant 16th note tempo, and you're not going to have anything to really bolster you down as to knowing where a melody lies in it. So let's continue. So he did the same thing where he just kind of moved his pedal tone index finger around and hit the alternate picked with the string next to it, giving you that kind of familiar at the gates in flames, like old, Gothenburg sound, which then got co-opted by the metalcore movement. And that's why I say that, like, I'm hearing that tonality creep in to what this band is trying to portray itself as a death metal band, but that's not really equated with that sound anymore. That's been co-opted by a completely different thing, and it's now been ingrained in this modern metal movement where you hear that, you know the emotional effect that it has on you based on the root notes that he's hitting, but he's kind of just moving a shape around and continuing with that 16th note barrage, and that's the entirety of the riff. I think he moves it up an octave. We can see where it finishes here. So yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to grab onto there. It's just it just kind of comes and goes, and it makes you think that it's technical because of how dexterous it is and how consistent it is. You hear a flurry of notes like that, you're kind of tricked into thinking that you're dealing with an array of sounds that represent a lot of different emotions coming together at once. But because he hasn't split up the rhythm in any way and hasn't given any kind of value over one note passage over another through repetition, there isn't really anything that would make this identifiable as a riff, let alone a theme in a song. And that's kind of where modern metal is going, unfortunately. You have either the flurry of notes like this that are just consistent and don't give you a break for anything, and that kind of gives the guise of like a really technical outpouring, but it really is just kind of lazy, and it becomes like I said, like a wallpaper of sound that you just kind of can't tune into. And it's kind of surprising that this has taken hold with modern audiences because, as we all know, we don't have the attention span we used to, and this immediately makes me kind of tune out. But because it's superficially very busy, people are kind of drawn in to the superficialities of it, and these videos exist so that your bedroom guitar player can try to figure it out and play along. But I don't think there's going to be like a resulting feeling of accomplishment if you nail it down. It's going to feel the same way as if you were running your scales in your bedroom trying to figure out, guitar or music theory on your own. So I think that's part of the problem as to how that is going to inhibit what songwriting is for metal, especially since this is now the focus. The guitar playthroughs and the small portions of riffs that you see from other players. Like this is an actual band. This is a very popular band, so they're not guilty of the here's 30 seconds, let me get my YouTube clicks. But it's still presenting an image of music that isn't necessarily substantial, as much as I would like it to be presenting a coherent thought and a coherent emotion behind it. There's just not a whole lot to grab onto here, but this is the new face of what tech death is, even though there isn't a whole lot of death metal in it. But yeah, I think that we really do need to see the way to turn this around now that YouTube and just viewing the player is kind of the way to kind of get an audience nowadays. We need to have the YouTube guitar player start focusing on showing how composition matters and showing how they brought an emotion that they had to the table, let it become music, and show how all of the parts in the song or in the riff end up corresponding to each other to formulate a more cohesive artistic statement. That would be something that I think could turn it around in a way where you're not going to have the same kind of enthralling effect anymore when you watch just someone jamming nonstop 16th notes with no rhythmic changing in it and no melody to nail the passage down. So there are ways around it. We just have to try to pinpoint how we can get the audience to care about the stuff that makes music great again. But it's going to be an uphill battle for that. So we'll see where we go from there.